World of Warcraft is one of my favorite games of all time, but I stopped playing it, and I'll tell you why. Before I discuss World of Warcraft, let me explain how I got here. Many years before I got into World of Warcraft, I was a big fan of RuneScape. RuneScape was the first RPG game I ever played, and really laid the foundations for what I expected an MMO to be. This was back in the early 2000s. I can't remember the exact year I started, but it must have been when I was in middle school. I never learned every aspect of the game, but since I was a young kid with plenty of free time, I just began playing and having fun with no real goals in mind. I was amazed that not only was this game free, but it was an online game, which was a new thing for me. And it was crazy that you didn't have to download anything. You could just play it from your web browser, which made it super accessible to just about anyone with a regular consumer PC. I loved pretending I was a brave knight, exploring the world, killing enemies, and improving my combat and other skills with every action I did. It was addicting seeing the number on each of my skill levels go higher and higher. It was also fun to collect loot everywhere I went and work toward making my character look cooler with the best weapons and armor I could find. One of my favorite things to do in the game was risking my inventory and going in the wilderness to do some player killing by attacking lower level players and taking their gear, and running as fast as I could when higher level players came after me. This was the first game I had to really grind. Mining and smithing kind of felt like a chore, but at the same time, it was really fun and addicting. In RuneScape, I could spend hours just chopping down trees and seeing my level go higher. RuneScape was the first game where I truly enjoyed just chilling and fishing, and sometimes I would strike up a conversation with players that were fishing next to me. Only a couple years after getting into RuneScape did I start hearing about World of Warcraft. This game looked so much better than RuneScape. The graphics were much better and the art style was much more appealing to me. At the time, I didn't understand how different World of Warcraft was compared to RuneScape. I assumed it was a pretty similar game, but with much more money behind it and a bigger player base. I remember seeing the game on the shelves of retail stores like Best Buy and Staples. The cover art looked so cool to me. But I found out you had to pay a subscription fee of about $15 a month. Back then, $15 seemed like a lot more money than it does today. You were able to buy more with $15 then than you can now. I also didn't have a job at the time. My parents were always very frugal and would typically only buy me gifts for my birthday or Christmas. And World of Warcraft wasn't a priority for me over games that didn't require subscriptions. Back then, digital subscriptions were much more rare compared to all the apps and live streaming services people subscribe to today. So I didn't even bother asking my parents to buy me a subscription. Many years passed and I regretfully missed out on the special experience of Vanilla WoW, along with the following couple expansions that World of Warcraft vets still rave about to this day. The way they talk about that era of WoW really makes me wish I could have played back then to see if the experience was really as great as they say. I continued to stubbornly resist the urge to subscribe to WoW throughout most of my 20s, because I still felt angry that a subscription was necessary to begin with. And in my 20s, gaming just wasn't that much of a priority to spend that kind of money on. Eventually I tried to give WoW a try, but coincidentally I jumped into what was widely considered to be one of WoW's worst expansions of all time, which was Shadowlands. Since I didn't have other WoW expansions to compare it to, I really didn't think it was that bad. I loved playing campaign games and enjoyed leveling and questing through most of the campaign. One of my regrets during that expansion was paying for a character boost. Everyone online insisted that World of Warcraft is all about the endgame content. At that time, I really didn't understand what that meant because I've never played a game that had quote-unquote endgame content. I had always heard about raids in World of Warcraft, and I always wanted to try one to see what was so great about it. And with my limited time as a working adult gamer, I decided to pay for a character boost to cut down on the time it takes to level up, because I had always heard that leveling in WoW takes an extremely long time grinding, which I was too impatient to deal with. I used the character boost on a warlock because it just seemed like it would be a fun class to play. Later on, I ended up regretting that decision when I realized I didn't really enjoy the warlock class. So I ended up wasting the boost and deleted the character only to start over from scratch. Now when it comes to playing game franchises, my brain is wired to want to play through the entire series from the beginning. For example, I played Halo 1 followed by 2 and 3, which allowed me to understand the storyline and the lore, and provided me with a higher feeling of fulfillment at the end. Since there have already been so many expansions released for WoW, I knew playing through each one would be a pretty monumental task, especially given the amount of time I had to dedicate to gaming. I was highly confused when I read people online saying that it's really not worth playing the old expansions because all the current content is played on the current expansion. I was also a little confused when people said the expansions don't really have much of a typical campaign storyline to them. This was odd to me because my understanding of other game franchises is that when new ones come out, the story typically continues. It was also strange because I know there are a lot of World of Warcraft books and fans that are passionate about the lore of World of Warcraft. The Chromie time system seemed a little confusing to me too, but I ended up trying out some of the old expansions here and there. Based on what everyone was telling me, it kind of felt like I was wasting my time in these old expansions. I felt like I was so far behind the entire WoW community. Now I have a lot of other games in my Steam library and wanted to take a break from World of Warcraft. When I finally came back, everyone was saying the expansion was getting close to the end, and I felt like I was in a race to level up my character so I could finally reach the endgame content. Well, I didn't reach my goal before the expansion ended, so I was left with a bitter taste in my mouth for the game, and decided it really wasn't as good of a game as I always thought it would be. But a part of me felt like I was missing something. Maybe I wasn't playing the game the right way. I know there is a ton of information to learn about World of Warcraft, and I probably only learned about 10% of all there is to learn. Also, there's something about World of Warcraft's art style and vibe that I will always love. So when Dragonflight came out, I got sucked back in. This time I didn't buy a boost. I started from scratch and enjoyed the relaxing, chill gameplay, questing through the expansion while listening to podcasts. I also grinded dungeons to get one of my characters to max level. The dungeons were fun, but also frustrating when the people I was playing with didn't think I was good enough and booted me from the dungeon. I always heard that MMOs are so popular because of how social they are, and I remember moments in RuneScape where I casually struck up a conversation with other players roaming about the world. There were even times where higher level players wanted to help out a low level player like me, and were nice enough to request a trade to generously give me high value items and gear. But I didn't find this to be the case in World of Warcraft. Most of the time when I was questing, I didn't see too many people, and when I did, they looked like they were in a rush to go somewhere else. It wasn't a relaxing, chill place to converse with players like RuneScape was. I later learned that if you want to talk to people, you have to go to main hubs where players congregate. But I found that there were so many people that my messages would kind of get drowned out and ignored. Once I finally reached max level, I tried improving my gear in heroic dungeons, and then finally tried my first raid. I can't remember which raid I played, but I didn't find it to be very fun because it just seemed super chaotic, and when we finished the raid, I didn't even get any good loot because other players took it. I didn't really understand how the raid loot system worked, and it seemed unnecessarily confusing, so I just didn't even bother researching how it worked. That raid experience was such a disappointment that I didn't even bother trying another one. I just rarely have time to commit multiple hours for a single raid, that it's not worth my time if I don't enjoy it and don't have a guarantee of earning good loot at the end. Maybe there's still too much information about the game I'm missing to thoroughly enjoy it as much as others. But that's one of the main reasons I quit WoW. There is so much to do in WoW and so much to learn that it's just too overwhelming for a casual gamer like me. I'm not going to dedicate all my time outside of the game to researching and learning the ins and outs of the game just to get a good experience out of it. If I'm going to spend all that time learning something, I'd rather study a real-world skill like learning Spanish or improving at the guitar. I like how you have more control of combat in WoW than you do in RuneScape, but the amount of combat abilities you have to learn is another annoying and overwhelming aspect of the game for me. Many of my abilities seemed useless for my playstyle, but I was always paranoid that maybe there was actually a good reason to use some of the ones that I wasn't using. People told me I have to learn the rotations for my class, and others recommended using add-ons to tell me when to use each ability. I just had no interest in memorizing rotations, and the fact that you have to look for all these third-party add-ons to have a good experience in WoW really irritated me. I just want to play the game. I think the game should have everything you need to play already in it. To me, it's just laziness on Blizzard's part that they don't incorporate most of the important add-ons into the game. I think they should get rid of the ability to use add-ons altogether. Even with all these annoyances, I was still craving the social interaction that everyone says WoW has. From what I read on Reddit, most people said joining guilds helps a lot. I had a hard time finding a guild that I felt like would be a good fit for me. I also didn't want to join a guild because a lot of them are very strict about how you play with them, and I didn't want to feel like the game was a job that I had to show up for at a certain time, multiple days a week. I want to be able to pick up and play at my leisure. I know there are guilds that are more chill, but most of those guilds don't seem very active and are borderline dead. I also don't think those guilds offer as much of a valuable experience as the ones that take their guilds more seriously. Maybe one day I'll make more of an effort to join a guild. I know a lot of people got excited about the flying mechanics in Dragonflight, but I wasn't one of them. I prefer exploring and appreciating the world on foot, but the option to fly everywhere in Dragonflight just seems so convenient that it feels like a waste of time to travel to far locations on foot. I also thought the storyline of Dragonflight and the characters were all pretty corny. I always hear Asmongold rant and rave about how badass the characters in WoW used to be. Why can't we go back to that instead of making such lame and soft characters that primarily appeal to a certain crowd in the WoW community? I also read that Classic WoW has a more chill community and is designed like vanilla WoW without a dungeon finder, which encourages more opportunities for social interaction. After trying out Classic WoW, I did finally have a social interaction in the world. Instead of queuing up for Dungeon Finder like you do in retail WoW, I asked some players to go into a dungeon with me, and we ended up beating the dungeon. That was a positive experience that actually made me really happy. I wanted to do it again, but this time I had a harder time getting people to join me in the dungeon. Another cool thing I noticed in Classic WoW was that while I was leveling, there were other players that would pass through and actually help me kill mobs that I had to kill from my quests. And they would even talk a little bit in the chat, saying thanks for helping them or strategizing with me. I felt like I was finally starting to get the WoW experience I wanted. Not to mention, Classic WoW had me less overwhelmed with the smaller amount of abilities that you have, as compared to the long list of abilities you get in retail WoW. However, I didn't play Classic WoW for very long because, like I said, I have other games I like to play. As a casual gamer, I really don't want to solely play World of Warcraft throughout the year. The problem with my playstyle is that with all the breaks I take from WoW, I end up falling behind in each season, and then I feel discouraged from jumping back in. I don't want Blizzard to just continuously pull money out of my bank account throughout the year if I'm not constantly playing it and getting my money's worth, so I just stopped playing it altogether. After all my time in WoW, I realized it's really not the game I originally thought it was. Don't get me wrong, I still really like WoW, but I had to change my expectations and mindset for the game. I found out about Turtle WoW, which is a free private server. Turtle WoW is basically just vanilla WoW, but with some additional content always getting updated to keep it fresh. And it's free, so I can casually come and go as I please, and never feel like I'm in a rush or feel like I have to plan out an entire month of game time just to get my money's worth. So I plan on playing Turtle WoW from time to time, just to scratch my World of Warcraft itch. That doesn't mean I won't ever come back to retail WoW. I actually do still want to try out the new expansion, The War Within, but when I do come back, my mindset will be different. I learned that for me, the main point of the game is actually not the endgame content where the community gets super competitive and arrogant. I prefer the leveling experience. I enjoy questing and progressing through the storyline of the campaign. If I make a second character, I probably won't care to play through the entire campaign for a second time. So I'll probably grind a lot of dungeons, which I also enjoy. Then if I'm still enjoying WoW, maybe, just maybe, I will finally join a guild to play through mythic dungeons and raids. But I've heard recently a lot of players have fallen off in mythic dungeons because they are way too difficult, so we'll have to see about that. Anyway, this was my story, and I'm not here to tell you you shouldn't play WoW and enjoy it. If you do, I'm happy for you. I just wanted to express my frustrations with the game and maybe offer some insight that will help other casual gamers go into the game with the right expectations and mindset that will make the game more enjoyable for you. If you got value out of this video, please subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching the video, and see you in the next one.